Hey guys, so we are back with another books that I want to read in 2025. This time around, as you can tell from the title, we're going to be talking about some books that I want to read that are in the non-fiction genre. When I got back into reading as an adult in like my mid to late 20s, I was heavily a non-fiction only girly. I was very rarely picking up a fiction book. And then when I remembered that, hold on a minute, I can also read fiction books and that I actually really enjoy reading fiction books, I then went the complete other way and read like 70 plus fiction books in 1 year and completely disregarded non-fiction books. So in 2025, what I want to do is get back into non-fiction books while still maintaining my love of fiction by just doing like a little mix of both, I suppose. But I find that I really have to be conscious about reading and reaching for non-fiction books. So I thought by showing you 6 of the non-fiction books that I currently own that I am absolutely dying to get to this year, you can keep me accountable, right? So the first book that we have here is The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. This is a really interesting look into traumatic stress and how that generally affects our bodies as a whole. This also dives into a question as to whether we need to be considering alternative treatment methods away from, your typical verbal therapies or drug medicines, and kind of how it also affects it being traumatic stress, how it also affects other people outside of the person who is dealing with said traumatic stress, and how that kind of manifests generation after generation without appropriate treatment. For someone who's trying to be in her healing era, this I think is going to be a very insightful read for me, quite like when mental health is discussed also in a very scientific way. I love when it's discussed in a fragile and gentle and almost not whimsical but very open-ended way, whereas I think it'll be really interesting as well to see it from a scientific perspective. So I could be completely wrong in that statement, but that's kind of what I've gathered from what I've seen about this book and what the blurb says about it. So yeah, next we have Just Kids by Patti Smith. I know that you have seen this on Pinterest, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, name a platform, people have been talking about it. This seems to be the most popular book by Patti Smith out of her collection, and I'm pretty sure that comes with very good reason. This is long overdue and it's been sat on my TBR for way too long. I thrifted this like over a year ago. The blurb says, Just Kids begins as a love story and ends as an elegy. It serves as a salute to New York City during the late 60s and 70s and to its rich and poor, its hustlers and hellions. A true fable, it is a portrait of 2 young artists' descent, a prelude to fame. It's also blurbed by Joan Didion, so I think we're within good company here. Next we have Akala's Natives Raising Class in the Ruins of Empire. I love reading about history, but I also really enjoy reading about racial systems and how that has developed over the course of centuries. As a person who migrated here when I was 8 years old, I often question where I sit in the society that I was raised in, because I often find that I am too foreign around here, but I'm also too foreign back home. If you have not heard of Akala, I beg you, please pick up a book of his or even just YouTube a lot of his talks, because that man is the epitome of eloquent and educated. Akala talks about his upbringing, his personal upbringing, and he talks about what it was like growing up as a mixed race kid. He also talks about the difficulties and just the experience altogether. The blurb says, from the first time he was stopped and searched as a child to the day he realized his mom was white, to his first encounters with racist teachers, Raising Class have shaped Akala's life and outlook. In Natives, he takes his own experiences with education, the police, identity, and everything in between, and uses them to look at the social, historical, and political factors that have left us with where we are today. Like I said, I only have high praises for Akala's work, so this I know will be very insightful, and I'm very much looking forward to picking this one up this year. Next up, we have Dear Dolly by Dolly Alderton. I absolutely loved Everything I Know About Love, and I read that a few years ago, and it really just spoke to me as a woman in her, at the time, late 20s. Now I've crossed the 30 threshold and I'm loving life where I am right now, but I think Dolly Alderton has such a way with her advice. It's very endearing, it's very gentle but also very real. The way Dolly expresses her advice kind of feels like you're just out with your girlfriends and you're having a cocktail or two, just putting the world to rights. And I love that approach because it's a very feminine approach to advice. I feel like oftentimes I find that advice is very masculine, in a sense of you must do this, you have to be doing that, and it almost feels quite like militant, whereas I find that Dolly Alderton's approach to advice is just way more loving, and I just cannot wait to read this one. The blurb of this one says, "A problem shared truly is a problem halved, and nobody knows that better than Dolly Alderton. Her weekly agony aunt column in the Sunday Times style magazine attracts countless letters, ranging from the hilariously zany to the painfully relatable, from readers seeking consolation in her warmth, wit, and wisdom. Without judgment and with deep empathy informed by her own much chronicled adventures in love, friendship, and dating, Dolly leads us by the hand through the various labyrinths of life." Need I say more? Okay, next up we have Noam Chomsky's How the World Works. I picked up my love for Noam Chomsky through my dad, who is literally who bought me my Noam Chomsky books growing up. This is actually a collection of 4 smaller books that were initially published separately. So the first one is What Uncle Sam Really Wants, which looks at the main goals of US foreign policy, the devastation caused abroad, and the brainwashing at home. The second book is The Prosperous Few and the Restless Many, which looks at the new global economy, food and third world economic miracles, quote unquote, the roots of racism. And then we've also got Secrets, Lies, and Democracy, the US, the CIA, religious fundamentalism, global inequality, the coming eco-catastrophe being what it looks into, and finally The Common Good, which looks at equality, freedom, the media, the myth of the third world debt, and manufacturing dissent. Noam Chomsky, again, I wouldn't necessarily say that I agree absolutely 100% with everything that the gentleman says. However, I just absolutely love his work, and quite frankly, I do, majority of the time, agree with a lot of his positions on certain topics. So yeah. And then last but certainly not the least, we have Afro Hirsch's Decolonizing My Body, which was kindly gifted to me last year by Vintage Publishing. This is another one that I have been dying to get to. Blurb says, "Decolonizing My Body is a powerful excavation of the Eurocentric beauty standards that have long shaped how, in particular, those from the global majority are perceived and view themselves. Taking us from puberty to end of life, Hirsch shows us that the ways in which we adorn and present ourselves have spiritual implications and shape the possibilities we see for ourselves in the world. These insights and discoveries will empower you to reconnect with your own ancestry, better understand the link between beauty, history, and respectability, politics, and liberate yourself from mainstream standards and systems that aren't serving you." Now, I am actually most intrigued about this one. I can go on and on about it for absolutely ages, but as an Asian woman, as a brown woman who was raised from the age of 8 in England, I find that around me there was a certain beauty standard that I just could never meet. I couldn't be blonde hair with blue eyes with fair skin. That was just never me. And quite frankly, back home in the Philippines, we also really love fair skin. We love the Western look, and we often look down on those with darker skin, which is, funnily enough, naturally the skin of those who live in a tropical country, right? But like I said, I can go on and on about that for absolute years. Since entering my 30s, I have been looking more into detaching myself from these learned understanding of what beauty should look like. You know, you go on TikTok and a lot of the influencers are white girls, and that's no problem with that. But for me, I just need to consider whether the advice that they're giving for their hair and their skin and their diets, etc., applies to me, and whether that is and should be the standard, and whether that should be taken as gospel. And so I think with the boom of social media, especially apps like TikTok, I think information like that is so saturated that people may feel like that's what I need to follow. Like I said, it's about detaching myself from really just taking what these influencers are telling me that I should be looking into for my skin, for my hair, for my body, etc. Like I said, I can talk about for absolute ages. So guys, those are the 6 books that I want to be reading from the non-fiction genre in the year of 2025. I am going to try and read one every month, and so this should hopefully satisfy for the first 6 months of the year. So I hope this, by me putting it out there on the internet into the universe, I'm going to be held accountable by you know, sharing this goal with you guys. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If you did, please do give it a thumbs up. If you haven't yet, please subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.